quiet seat. How presence changes everything. The train had already been moving for several minutes before Emilio realized he had not noticed its start. No jolt, no lurch, no announcement that mattered enough to register. Just motion quietly, replacing stillness, while his mind stayed somewhere else. He sat by the window in seat 17B, laptop open, phone glowing beside it, thoughts stacked on thoughts like luggage piled too high. Deadlines, unread messages, a conversation from yesterday replaying with sharper edges than it deserved. Outside, the city slid away in grey layers, but Emilio barely saw it. The train stretched across the continent, days of rails and stations and changing skies. He had chosen it deliberately instead of flying, telling himself he wanted the experience, the space to think. But now that he was here, his mind refused to arrive. Across the aisle, an elderly woman folded a scarf with careful attention, smoothing each crease as if it mattered. Emilio glanced at her and then back to his screen, fingers tapping without rhythm. The conductor passed, checking tickets. "Good morning," the man said. Not hurried, not loud. Emilio nodded without looking up. The train settled into its long, steady breathing, the kind of motion that invites you to drop into it if you let yourself. Emilio did not let himself. An hour passed, maybe two. The landscape softened from concrete to open fields, but Emilio stayed tight inside his thoughts. His shoulders ached. His jaw felt clenched without his permission. At some point, the train slowed briefly, the small town slipping by, and the elderly woman across from him stood. She smiled at him, gentle and unassuming. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the empty seat beside him. He hesitated, the way people do when their inner world feels more important than the outer one, then nodded and moved his bag. She sat and rested her hands in her lap, eyes drifting to the window. For a while, neither of them spoke. Emilio returned to his screen, but the words blurred. Something about the woman's stillness made his restless tapping feel loud. "You don't have to carry it all at once," she said suddenly, still looking outside. He looked at her, startled. "Carry what?" She smiled, just slightly. "Whatever you're holding so tightly." Emilio laughed, more defensive than amused. "I'm just busy." She nodded. Yes. Busy is a common way to leave the moment. The words landed softly, but they landed. Emilio closed his laptop halfway, not consciously deciding to, just following a small impulse he didn't argue with. "What makes you say that?" he asked. She adjusted her scarf. "Because when we are here, really here, we don't need to brace ourselves against life." Emilio watched the fields blur by green and wide and unconcerned with his schedule. "I don't think I know how to do that," he said. She turned to him then. "You're doing it now." He frowned. "I am?" "Yes. You stopped fighting the moment long enough to notice it." The train curved gently, sunlight spilling across their row. For the first time since boarding, Emilio noticed the warmth on his hands. They talked for a while after that, though talked wasn't quite the right word. She shared small stories, nothing dramatic, places she'd seen, people she'd met, moments that mattered only because she had been present for them. Emilio found himself listening instead of waiting to speak. At the next station, she stood again. "This is my stop," she said. "Thank you for the company." "Thank you," Emilio replied, surprised to mean it. As she stepped off, she paused and leaned back in. One small thing, she said. If you let yourself be where you are, life does most of the work for you. The doors closed and the train moved on. Emilio sat there for a long moment, laptop still half closed, phone dark. The seat across from him was empty now, but something had shifted. He looked out the window and actually saw the land, not as background, not as scenery, but as something unfolding right now. The rhythm of the train softened his breathing without effort. His shoulders dropped, his jaw loosened. He didn't try to meditate or fix anything. He just stayed. A few rows ahead, a young couple argued in whispers, tension sharp between them. Normally, Emilio would have tuned it out or judged it or absorbed it without knowing why he felt uneasy afterward. This time, he noticed the feeling rise and pass like a wave. In the dining car, later, he chose a seat by the window. Instead of scrolling through messages while standing in line, is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The server smiled more than expected, as if responding to something unspoken. Long journey? She asked. Yes, Emilio said, then paused. But it feels shorter than I thought. She nodded, recognizing the truth in it. That evening, as the train crossed into mountains, the sky deepened into colors he couldn't name. Emilio watched until his eyes watered. He slept better than he had in months. Not because the bed was comfortable, but because his mind had nothing to defend against. The next day, a delay stranded the train outside a small station longer than planned. Grumbles spread through the cars. Emilio felt irritation rise, then remembered the warmth on his hands from yesterday, the woman's quiet certainty. He breathed and let the irritation dissolve without pushing it away. He stepped onto the platform for fresh air. A man nearby struggled with a dropped bag, apples rolling across the concrete. Without thinking, Emilio bent to help. Thanks, the man said, relief evident. Rough day. Seems like a good one to slow down, Emilio replied. The man laughed. You're probably right. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing profound, just shared presence. When the train finally moved again, Emilio returned to his seat lighter than before. Miles away, in a city he would never visit, the man would remember that brief exchange weeks later when his own life felt rushed beyond measure. He would pause, just for a moment, and that pause would soften a decision that might have gone another way. Emilio didn't know that. He didn't need to. On the final day, the train rolled into its last station under a wide, open sky. Emilio packed, slowly, deliberately. As he stepped onto the platform, he felt the quiet certainty that nothing had been missed, that nothing was behind him he needed to chase. Life had been happening the whole time, and by choosing to be present in one small moment, he had changed the shape of many others without ever trying to